I don't know. I think that
I was going to stop by your house at
like that today, like going through the stuff,
you know,
because it didn't seem like
7:30, right?
But I was talking to Becky, and she's like, "Yeah, we might have to put all those because
you still have what?
I had to drop off a check at the housing office, and they weren't open, so I was going to wait at your apartment.
See, before what we had to
Thank
do
you all for coming on a actually a nice summer day. I guess it's low 70s outside. So thank you for all the students and faculty who showed up. So we can have some good, tough questions for Katrina. But Katrina Marie Jackson has put together a thesis on the influence of television and film on interest in space and science. And those of you who've read it can, especially those of us who are science fiction, I don't know what that next word is. Aficionado. Yes, I was thinking of that word. That's too high tech. We'll recognize a couple things that she mentioned in there that were really very interesting. Without further ado, Katrina.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Whalen. Okay, so it's a common idea that TV and movies can inspire us and get us interested in different topics. And sometimes specific TV shows are credited for making a particular topic popular. For example, Glee has been credited with increasing the popularity of high school show choirs. Shows like Dancing with the Stars have been credited with increasing people's interest in ballroom dance. And sometimes people will say that it inspired them to pursue their career. In an interview on 60 Minutes, Sonia Sotomayor said that reading Nancy Drew and watching Perry Mason on TV as a kid put her on a track to becoming a Supreme Court justice. And this influence of entertainment media doesn't stop with the sciences. CSI has been credited with dramatically increasing the number of undergraduates studying forensic science. And The Big Bang Theory has been credited with doing the same thing for physics. And there was a report after the broadcast of a stargazing TV show with the British personality Brian Cox that Amazon's telescope sales increased by 500%. Then there's sometimes even the idea within science-related television that science-related television inspires a scientist. On a recent episode of The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's favorite childhood TV star, Professor Proton, came and visited, and Sheldon told Professor Proton that without him coming into his living room every day at 4 o'clock, instead of becoming a world-renowned theoretical physicist, he would have ended up as a surgeon or a hobo. So what I would like to know for my thesis is, what role do TV and film play in inspiring interest in space and science? And so to get a better idea of this, I did a literature review. I looked at at space pioneers throughout history and trying to see what inspired them to become interested in space flight. And then I created an anonymous online survey and distributed it, and then looking at the results, analyzing the data, and then a discussion and recommendations for further research. So in addition to this specific topic, I also wanted to familiarize myself with the field of science communication in general, since it's not really a focus area of the Space Studies program. And I came across all sorts of really interesting science communication topics. And if any of you are looking for a thesis topic and you think something on here is particularly interesting, talk with me, and I can show you all sorts of different articles. So there's the traditional science journalism and agency press, different science organizations trying to communicate their research with the public. And then there are all sorts of different non-traditional methods of outreach and communication. A few I have pictured here are putting images of astronomy in public places that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find them, like in airports, or there are astronomy radio shows, or using social media, like all the NASA spacecraft and rovers have their own personal Twitter accounts. And you can also study public perceptions of science, different stereotypes people have of science and scientists, and how favorably they perceive science. You can look at how science and scientists are portrayed in television and film. And you can also look at maybe effects on science literacy. There are some standard science literacy questions that the NSF and other organizations use in a lot of surveys. You can look at effects of specific TV shows. For example, the so-called CSI effect, how this crime-solving show and other shows like it have perpetuated throughout our culture, our understanding of forensic science, and particularly within the juror system, how we expect to have evidence presented to us. You can also look at collaborations between scientists and TV shows, films, movies, theater, all sorts of different things, often mediated by programs such as the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation or the National Academy of Sciences Science Entertainment Exchange. And you can also look at the intersection between science communication and politics, how sometimes politics affects how science is communicated, or how maybe entertainment media affects how the science is communicated to the politicians. So there are a lot of different interesting topics. None of these really look specifically at how entertainment media influences people's interest in science. Eventually, I did find one article that sort of touched on this that was recently published just this year in a journal of media psychology. Some German researchers were interested in figuring out if people's interest increased when science research was portrayed with certainty or with uncertainty. And so they had participants watch features from TV science magazines like Nova Science Now, but the German versions, watching them over a 6-week period so that they could have a cultivation effect of seeing them over a period of time. And in this particular study, the participants who watched the science portrayed with certainty, their interest in science increased a little bit. And the participants who watched the science portrayed with uncertainty, the interest didn't decrease, but it remained stagnant. And now, a bit of an interesting twist on my literature review. A few days ago, I was looking for an image to accompany this slide. I Googled German science television and actually came across a Deutsche Welle article, the German international news organization, about, in Germany, them wanting to have women portrayed as scientists more often on television. And this article, it quoted a lot Marion Esch, the head of an organization called MINTIF, MINT being the German equivalent of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, so MINT in fictional formats. And I emailed her. She sent me back a 116-page document published by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research titled STEM and Equal Opportunities in TV, Drama, and Formats, which included all sorts of really interesting and relevant information that I found just a few days ago. Of course, after I had finished my research project and writing my thesis. So what I'll do is at the end, I will go back to a few of the things mentioned in the document she sent me and compare see how that compares to the research I did. So my literature review, it gave me a better idea of what specifically I wanted my topic to be and what questions I wanted to ask and explore. So I wanted to know what different factors inspire people's career choices and interests in science and non-science, like classes and teachers, current events, books, museums, television, family and friends. And then specifically for television and films, how do these inspire people's interests and career choices? And then is there any differences amongst different genres? Science fiction, documentaries, children's shows, primetime television, do these inspire people's interests differently? And then specifically for people who are in space science, how are they influenced by entertainment media? And then sort of a side question, are there any particular correlations between different television shows and science literacy levels? And then also I wanted to look at what role entertainment media has played in history with the space industry. So I looked at 6 different space pioneers. In the interest of time here, I will talk about 3 of them. So first is Walter Hohmann, and there's not really a lot of information on him in English, and personally I think he would make an interesting thesis topic all in himself. He was born in 1880, and his main job was a structural and civil engineer, and he just liked to calculate equations for space travel on the side, such as the Hohmann transfer orbit is what he's particularly famous for. And his main publication from 1925 is Die Erreichbarkeit der Himmelskörper, the attainability of heavenly bodies. And there was a 1994 edition, all in German, but the 1994 edition had a foreword by his daughter, Marga, and she wrote a little bit about his life. And so he was born in 1880 in Germany. At the age of 6, he moved with his family to South Africa. He had an early interest in astronomy. His father would show him the southern constellations. And Marga makes a note that as soon as he read science fiction by the French author Jules Verne and the German author Kurt Loswitz, that he wondered, how do you get up there? And so that question sort of propelled him to try and figure out the answer for the rest of his life. And so she makes a note of how the inspiration of Jules Verne and science fiction had its positives and negatives. On the one hand, it really got the public in Germany and other places interested in space travel, and it inspired other space pioneers. But on the other hand, it made it so that some scientists didn't really take space travel seriously. When Walter Hohmann was sending his publication to his publisher, the publisher said that he agreed that space travel was a really important topic, but to lower his expectations of how well this publication would do, because a lot of professionals think that spaceflight is a Jules Verne-like utopia, and so they don't really take it all that seriously. Then there's Robert Goddard, our American pioneer of rocketry. He was born in 1882 in Massachusetts. His mother was sick when he was a kid, and so his grandmother took care of him a lot, and his grandmother acted like young Robert was kind of a frail and sickly boy, even though he wasn't really, but she acted like he was, and so kept him kind of confined and in isolation. And so he read a lot of library books and really enjoyed the science fiction ones. And he liked Jules Verne, but he really enjoyed H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, about the Martian attack on Earth. And that one really got his imagination going. And it sort of influenced a strange experience he had with a cherry tree. One specific October day, he was climbing a cherry tree to cut down a branch, and he was looking down at the meadow below him, and he sort of had this vision of what it might look like if something was being launched up below him that could possibly reach Mars, and what that would look like from up above, it being launched towards him. And he remembered that day for the rest of his life. He celebrated it as his anniversary day. That day he had a vision in the cherry tree. And so, yeah, he was a little odd like that. Then we have Hermann Oberth, born in 1894 in what is currently Romania. He read Jules Verne at the age of 12, and he became obsessed with finding out which aspects of the book could actually be possible, if you could actually travel into space, what the real physics might be like. Later, when he was in his 20s, he collaborated with the German Max Valier, and they tried to utilize Jules Verne's work to try and drum up more interest in space travel, and so they published something that was about the real physics of Jules Verne and doing different calculations of what would have been realistic and what wouldn't have. And it worked. It got more people interested, and some of those people wrote even more things that got the public interested, and there's sort of a domino effect, and more people in Germany got interested in rocketry and spaceflight, and they formed the Verein für Raumschifffahrt, the Society of Space Travel. And Hermann Oberth's work became popular enough that it inspired the filmmaker Fritz Lang to direct the film Frau im Mond, the Woman on the Moon. And he hired Hermann Oberth as the technical director of that film. So my survey, since as far as I knew, this hadn't really been researched at all before, and so I was just trying to figure out what possible relationships exist and try and figure out basically some more specific questions for further research. And so my survey is really suggestive exploratory research, and I used a convenience sampling method, basically using whoever I could get my hands on, which was basically people within the university. I sent emails to a bunch of department heads, and they sent it to their department listservs. And I encourage people to share it with their colleagues and friends. And I created the survey with the UND Qualtrics Research Suite. The university has a subscription to Qualtrics, which enables you to create surveys that you can distribute online. And I wanted to distribute it to scientists and non-scientists to sort of compare the two. And to try and give some further incentive, I offered, at the end of the survey, an opportunity to enter a drawing to win one of two $50 Amazon gift cards. So the survey includes questions on demographics, and it included some standard science literacy questions, like true or false, the center of the Earth is very hot. And then there are both free response questions as well as questions where they could rank how different possible factors might have influenced their interest in the primary. They were asked to give a primary interest that they had. And then the people who were interested in people who said that they were inspired by television shows and movies, there were both the free response questions where they could say which shows and movies inspired them, and then again rating different television shows on how frequently they watched it. So when I was creating the survey, I had the objectives to try and find a range of different factors that influence a person's interests, see how that compares between scientists and non-scientists, see if TV and film is one major factor, and compare that among scientists and non-scientists, and look specifically for people in space-related fields and see how this all works for them. And then for people who say they're not inspired at all by TV and film, see why. And then measuring the overall science literacy level of the participants, and comparing scientists versus non-scientists, and seeing if there's any variation among the different TV shows. And then looking at which science-related TV shows the participants watch, how that varies among the scientists and non-scientists, seeing if interest in science is associated with different shows in different ways, in different genres, and then seeing specifically for the people in space-related fields. And then seeing if there are any major differences among the different demographic groups. So the survey was open for a month. 251 participants completed the survey from start to finish. And out of these, 145 are female, 106 were male. And a little more than a third were 18 to 22, a little more than a quarter were 23 to 29. So mostly younger populations, and then smaller numbers of the people in older populations. And that corresponds roughly to their education levels, about a third in undergraduate school, about a third in graduate school, and then a little more than a quarter who had finished school with some sort of higher education degree. Mostly white, it's North Dakota to be expected. About half said they came from a middle class background. None of them said they came from an upper class background. And then a little more than 3/4 said they were affiliated with the University of North Dakota. I checked to see if there are any huge differences between the people at UND and the people from other locations, and there didn't seem to be. So for the rest of the results, I look at them all together, regardless of their location. And of the people at UND, almost half were undergraduates, about a third were graduate students, and then a few faculty members and staff members. One person said he or she was an administrator. So I wanted to get both scientists and non-scientists. I didn't really reach a non-science population very well, as you can see. A large majority of them were scientists. And of the non-scientists, this was a free response, and so it's just trying to categorize what different interests that they claim to have. 10 of them were some sort of arts type of interest. 8 of them said something regarding they just really liked to help people, which was a little vague. 6 of them had different hobbies like gardening or hunting, and then a variety of other interests. And then the same thing for the science interests. 29 were space-related, and that's a major subsample that I looked at. And then other common ones, a lot of them were related to biology or medicine, and a lot of computer-related ones, and then a wide range of other science fields. And then looking at the male-female population amongst the scientists and non-scientists. For the scientists, a little more than half were female, and in the space subsample, there were some more males than females. And then the non-scientists, again, I didn't really get a great population of non-scientists. It was mostly female. I'm not really sure why. So influencing factors. This was the free response, and I went through and categorized their different answers to what got them interested in their field that they had identified. And most popular for scientists, for classes and teachers, curiosity and attraction to the unknown and exploration, childhood or personal experiences, and entertainment media. And for the space subsample, entertainment media was the most popular one when you combine science fiction, science popularizers, books, and videos. And then for non-scientists, entertainment media wasn't in their top 5. They had parents, family members, or friends, childhood or personal experiences, classes, and teachers. And then I asked them to rank different factors, and from a scale of 1 being, this is the only reason I pursued this subject, to 5 being there was no influence at all. And then they also had an option of 6. This factor actually discouraged my interest in my discipline. And so the lower numbers means they were influenced more by that factor. And so for the total population, they had personal experiences ranked on average as the highest influencing factor, and classes and teachers, books, family, friends, TV, movies. For the scientists, majority were scientists, so it's the same order pretty much. For the space subsample, though, they have books and TV and movies at the top. And so, again, corresponding to their free response, they ranked entertainment media basically at the top again for most influential factors. And then for non-scientists, personal experiences, family, friends, classes, teachers. Ones that weren't so influential for everybody were museums, current events, the internet, and games. So looking specifically at the factor of TV and movies, again, 1 is the most influential, and 6 means it's discouraged their interest. You can see that scientists ranked TV and movies as being more influential than the non-scientists did. And for the space subsample, over half of them ranked it as a 2, meaning it was very influential. Then I wanted to ask the non-scientists if any of these factors might have contributed to them not being interested in science. And so the ones that, the most popular selections were classes and teachers and personal experiences as having put them off of science. So they had bad experiences somewhere along the way, and they didn't really enjoy science. TV and movies, only 3 people had selected as putting them off of STEM. So then for everybody who said that there is at least some influence from TV and movies, I asked them to, off the top of their head, name any TVs or TV series or movies that they could think of that influenced their interest. And so most popular responses were, for scientists, were Star Trek, Bill Nye, Star Wars, documentaries on the Discovery Channel, Stargate, Contact, Cosmos, Planet Earth, a lot of space-related ones. These ones come up again for the space subsample, of course, but even if you take out that space subsample, the non-space-related scientists thought that the space-related shows and movies were influential. For the non-scientists, there obviously wasn't a lot of overlap between the titles that they mentioned because they were so varied. But it is interesting to look at which subjects corresponded to being influenced by which TV shows and movies. There's some obvious ones like the Outdoor Channel influencing someone's interest in hunting and fishing, but then there are some less obvious ones like someone saying Doctor Who and Star Trek influenced their interest in group behaviors. And then for the people who said that TV shows and movies had no influence whatsoever on their interest in their subject, first I asked them to list a few movies and TV shows that they in general enjoyed, and then I asked them why those titles did not influence their interest in their subject. And understandably, a lot of them said that, well, those particular movies that they liked didn't relate to their subjects. And some of them said that they view television and movies solely as entertainment, or that they don't think it's really realistic and they don't really connect television and film to the real world. A few of them said that the shows they liked do actually relate to their subjects, but they didn't come out until later in their lives, so they don't contribute those to having influenced their interest. They're already interested in the subject. So then I look at the science literacy scores. As expected, the scores for the scientists are higher than for the non-scientists. The people in the space subsample had particularly high scores. Well over half of them had a perfect score of 12. And then looking between males and females, males on average had higher science literacy scores than the females. Don't really have a good answer for that, but that's not really my focus of this particular research. And then looking at the science literacy scores for each TV show. For the people who said that they watched each show at least somewhat frequently. And so over on down here is the total sample so that you can kind of compare. A little more than a third had a perfect score, and about a third had a score of 11, and then less than a quarter had scores lower than that. And so a lot of these charts are similar to that. Ones that look especially different are because they're really low sample sizes. Not a lot of people watched a lot of Dragonfly TV or Beakman's World. Cosmos had a science literacy scores a bit higher than average. So did Nova over there. And then all the science fiction ones had higher science literacy scores than the total sample, which I thought was pretty interesting. An obvious explanation for that might be maybe more scientists watch those shows than the non-scientists do. But looking at the percentage of scientists and non-scientists that watch each show, to go down to the science fiction ones, for Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, and Firefly, there were more scientists who watched it than the non-scientists. But then for Doctor Who, The X-Files, and The Twilight Zone, there wasn't really a huge difference. So that doesn't really explain it. But then looking through the rest of this chart, there's about similar percentages for the children's shows, for the crime shows, and for the medical shows. And then for the documentaries, on average, scientists watched them more than the non-scientists, especially for Cosmos, the Universe, and Nova. You can see there's big differences there. And for Mythbusters and The Big Bang Theory, these were some of the more popular shows with non-scientists as well, but the scientists still watched them more frequently than the non-scientists did. At the bottom here, if you can see that. And then you might notice that the highest two numbers on here, the highest two percentages, 76% and 62%, are for the space subsample. Majority of people in the space-related fields watch Star Trek and the Big Bang Theory, a lot more so than the rest of the participants. And in general, the space subsamples seem to watch more science-related television than the rest of the participants. So the most popular, the most watched TV shows for the scientists were Mythbusters, Big Bang Theory, and The Magic School Bus. For the space subsample, it was Star Trek, Big Bang Theory, and Mythbusters. And then for the non-scientists, it was Big Bang Theory, House, and The Magic School Bus. And for overall, the most popular ones were Big Bang Theory, Mythbusters, and The Magic School Bus. And so maybe that science literacy scores for the science fiction is caused, well, we saw that the males had higher science literacy scores than the females. Maybe more males watched the science fiction shows. And again, you can see this isn't entirely true. For Star Trek, Firefly, and The Twilight Zone, males did watch it more than the females did. But then for Doctor Who, X-Files, and Battlestar Galactica, there wasn't much of a difference. The males and females watched it approximately the same amount. So neither of the two possible obvious explanations for that high science literacy scores for the science fiction actually are true. So then looking more at this chart, there's not a lot of difference between the males and females for the children's shows. For the crime and medical shows, the females watched these significantly more than the males did. I tried sending an email to the Nielsen ratings people to see if they had information on this and if this was actually true, but they didn't get back to me. So curious. I don't know if that's how accurate these are. And then for documentaries, the males on average watched the documentaries more often than females did. And for Mythbusters, males watched it a little more than females. And for Big Bang Theory, females watched it a little more than males. So the top three popular science shows for the males were Mythbusters, Star Trek, and The Big Bang Theory. For the females, it was Big Bang Theory, The Magic School Bus, and CSI. And again, keep in mind this is a relatively young population, and I suppose if you were to survey just the older populations, they wouldn't think The Magic School Bus or Big Bang Theory was quite as popular. So then looking also at other demographics to see if there's any major differences, a couple trends that I noticed. First one is pretty self-explanatory. With increasing age, games and online videos and the internet became less influential. And then this one is not as self-explanatory. For comparing people who selected only white as their race or ethnicity to people who were mixed or of minority races, you can see they consider books and TV movies as slightly more influential than the white people did. I don't know. Wasn't a huge sample size of minorities, so 31 compared to 220. So, summary of these results: entertainment media is a top influencing factor, especially for the space subsample. Science fiction and Cosmos and Nova seem to be associated with higher science literacy levels among the people who watch those frequently. The space subsample seemed to watch more science TV than everyone else. And the most popular shows, science shows, were The Big Bang Theory, Mythbusters, and The Magic School Bus. So questions, really what I was trying to do with all this was narrow down some really specific questions that people could look into for future research. So questions I came up with based on my survey is, are people in space-related fields inspired by entertainment media more than other scientists are? And for all these questions, there's also, if so, why? What I can think of might be an explanation for this is perhaps people in space-related fields, they're not exposed to space sciences as much in school as other fields, and they might not be exposed to this through their parents and friends as much as other fields, and so maybe the only way that they become exposed to space-related sciences are through entertainment media, and so maybe that's why they seem to be inspired more by entertainment media than other scientists. That's just a guess. Then how does the influence of entertainment media on scientists compare to the influence on people in non-science fields? And are non-space-related scientists often inspired by space-related media? We had seen in my results that a lot of the shows that the non-space-related scientists say inspired them were space-related. And then, do people who regularly watch science fiction, Cosmos, or Nova tend to be more scientifically literate than average? And if so, why? Do people in space-related fields watch science-related television more than other scientists do? And are the interests of Americans of mixed or minority races and ethnicities influenced more by entertainment media than the solely white people? And are non-scientists who watch more science-related television more interested in science than those who watch less science-related television? This one I didn't look at specifically in my survey, but it's a question that occurred to me as I was looking through the results. And then, if they are more interested, does this interest correspond to being more financially and politically supportive of science organizations and research than the people who aren't interested? And this really gets at the purpose of getting people interested, is you want them to support you financially and politically. And so it's worth looking into if this interest actually corresponds to more support. And then this one is more of an opinion question. Should space-related media be used to foster interest in all fields of science, or should greater effort be taken to create more engaging stories related to other science fields, or both? And then also, should extra effort be taken to make science-related media more realistic? Because a few people have said that they're not inspired by TV and movies because they just don't think it's realistic and connects to reality. So should we make it more realistic, or is media really more influential when it's entertaining? And I've been focusing really this whole time on informal education and communication, but as we saw in the survey, formal education still plays a huge role in inspiring people's interests. And so I was wondering, if we included more space topics in school, would that possibly help influence people's interests not only in space but also in science fields and other non-science fields? Because it seemed like maybe space topics really helps people get interested in things in general. So going back to that German research, things seem to be a little different in Germany than here. They seem to have an especially high need for science TV there, because at the moment they hardly have any scientists on television, and young people, especially girls, don't really consider science very often as a career. And they actually point to us as examples of doing it right, of having substantial STEM content in television. Personally, I think the British have got us beat, but a lot of American documentaries are actually made by British people, I'm finding out. And they have the Wellcome Trust and all sorts of assistance for communicating science through entertainment media. But the Germans, especially Marion Esch, seems to be pointing to the United States and looking up to us. And they say that television can be a major inspiration for careers. They researched, they surveyed girls and boys, I believe ages 15 to 17, asking what different factors sparks their interest in different possible dream careers. And you can see movies/series is somewhere in the middle, but it's definitely a a significant influencing factor. They also have entertainment shows over here. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between that and the movies and series. So they say that particularly the women cite feature films and series as being sources of inspiration for dream careers more frequently than even than things that are supposed to really help you pursue a career counseling, documentaries, specialized books, lessons in class. So you can see they have education way down there. And young people, they attest to television series and feature films as having high career orientation content, as really being able to learn about different possible careers through watching these television series and films. And so comparing their chart to, this was my, my total sample, ranking the different factors and how much it influenced them. So some similarities, not really the same order. My sample has classes and teachers as one of the highest ranking ones, and TV and movies in the middle. And so slightly different approaches, but similar results. So in conclusion, I came up with a lot of questions that I think could be put to use in future research, and there's a lot of research that can be done for this topic. And I found that, indeed, entertainment media is a strong influencing factor in inspiring people's interests and career choices. And it's not confined to one specific genre. It's really all sorts of different genres can have that influence. When people were selecting their free responses, they had science fiction, and they had children's shows, and they had all sorts of different types of genres. And a recommendation in general, I think everybody should really try and support having science content on television shows and in movies. Organizations and individuals, I think they should try and support these efforts through either providing funding or providing science consulting for the directors and filmmakers, maybe providing locations that they can film at, being supportive of that, or even just supporting them through their own viewership and sharing it with friends and getting people to watch the shows. Because, of course, that's how the shows become successful, is if people watch it. And if you support these efforts, then you can really help increase interest in both adults and in the next generation of potential scientists. So, are there any questions? Yes.
The shows on television where the women liked more versus the men, it seemed that those shows had stronger women characters than the other shows that the men liked had stronger men characters. Is that common with all the other the gender-specific roles in films transfer to the people who watch them?
Yeah, that's probably a good explanation for that. People do tend to watch it when they can relate to the characters, and I didn't read the German research too thoroughly because it was just a few days ago, but they had some of that as well. The females, the shows that they watched really had stronger female characters. And so, yeah, that could be, I mean, for the medical and crime shows, they also have strong male characters, and so that's why I was confused on that one. But, yeah, that definitely can cause people to become more interested in a television show.
And then the only two other suggestions I would have made for the survey is maybe, I don't know, well, I took the survey, but did you ask how many hours a week or something the TV or film that people watch?
You mean how many hours a week just in general they watch television?
In general, yeah.
No, I didn't.
Okay. And then, well, I guess you kind of address that with people who read books for some of the categories where they're more influential than television was to begin with. And then the other one that would be cool to include for future research is maybe how many people have had NSF grants or science-related scholarships too. It would be cool to see if film and media also correlated to higher grant acquisition and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Distance questions?
Not yet.
Okay. More student questions?
Yes.
Amateur question, Katrina. Are you going to continue this research in your future phases of career development?
If I'm in the position to, I think it would definitely be interesting research to do. I'm hoping to get more into the production of different television shows myself.
Okay. Following with that, what would you do differently compare your technology, research technology applied for this project, if you continue this research further?
I would have liked to have found all that German information before I did my research. Other than that, I'm not sure. I think I did the best I could with information I had. But with the information I have, I think there is definitely a lot more specific research you could do and address these specific questions. And I hope that can be done, if not by me, then by other people.
Then I would share with you some sort of idea, because majority of the shows, TV shows or entertainment shows, are focused on so-called external technology, external environment, versus human factors and human limitations. Currently, the situation is changing. We are taking more and more thorough look on human limitations and human capabilities. Because human factor is very broadly considered area. Mostly for all those shows what you've considered, who is major participant, human participant for those shows? People with highly developed intellectual capabilities or inclination to develop those capabilities. And very often reduced physical capabilities in speed reactions and other stuff. People focused mostly on analytical efforts instead of application and execution efforts. But it is currently changing because many areas requires integration for fast reactions and highly developed intellectual skills, for example. So all those shows are oriented toward moderate sample for human subject. And my suggestion for you to think at least about would be in future development, future research, to take more thorough look on highly trained, highly developed, in many aspects, humans who would be participants for those shows. Because shows which show, there is sort of asymmetry in shows. There are sport-related shows, what you have not been considered here, and science-related shows. I'm, roughly speaking, talking about integration between sport-related show and science-related show, because science has to include human factor training. That's it from
Okay. Sure. Yeah?
How strong a correlation did you find between those who watched a lot of entertainment media with science content and those that pursued a science career?
So the correlation between people who watch more science television and if they pursued a science career.
Whether or not there was a trend?
Oh, well, one moment. Lots of questions. Okay. By looking at this chart, you can see that for most of the science-related shows, the scientists did watch it more than the non-scientists. And so on average, scientists did watch more science-related television. So, but whether that's because they're interested in science, so they watch the science-related television, or they watch more of it, and so they became scientists, you can't really tell.
So the direction of the influence is not
Right.
always clear.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This is slightly facetious, but would you favor putting a bounty on the head of executives basically who cancel shows very early before they've reached their peak?
I'm not sure I have the power for that. Yes.
Dead like me. I'm thinking it's the original Star Trek. We're all canceled prematurely.
I know a lot of people have been upset, but
Well, it's the same class of people that designed New Coke. Coca-Cola company in the process, almost.
yes.
It would be interesting. It would have been interesting if you could have had a larger pool of older people to determine how it was that they came to their science/space career choice. For those of us who were young and impressionable when the space age started, and we saw the evolution of it, I think that probably had a greater impact on us to actually see it happening than television. Also, another thing to take into account is that during the space race, the federal government established the National Defense Loan Act. And what that meant was that people who went into teaching and science, particularly, had the opportunities to get funding for a science career, many of them choosing space careers. So I think it's really interesting to see what the younger people are doing. Mm-hmm. But, the people who are 45 to 65 probably were influenced, or 71, probably were influenced by real life activities and the determination of the government that we would have a lot of scientists in school teaching.
I think to follow up on that, it'd also be useful, for example, if you're doing a more detailed study, to break down the TV shows by generation.
Yes.
And for example, most of those shows I never watched, not because I'm not interested in them, but I don't watch the Magic School Bus.
Many of them I've never heard of.
Disney's Man in Space, for example, was tremendously influential for students in the mid-1950s. Mm-hmm. And there was Man in Space was several TV series that were very popular at the time. But if you could sort when in an advanced study sort out by age and have the look at the shows that were available during the period in which they were impressionable ages, say 20 or less.
Did you break it down? I don't remember seeing it, but did you break it down somewhere? Science nonfiction versus science fiction? How influential that was? Because like Suzette was saying, I mean, you guys, not that the space shuttle wasn't real, but you guys had a real race going on where the news was real space events. And now it's like, TV shows, more or less fictional sort of things.
Right. Well, in the free responses for influencing factors, current events and the space race, the space shuttle, was one of the top 5 for the space subsample. And yeah, I didn't have a huge population of people in the older categories.
You need a much larger population, yeah.
Right.
Maybe smarter, too.
Well, that too.
Yeah, this is my one chart where I break it down by age, and mostly the difference was with the games and the internet.
I'm thinking, too, for future study, it would be interesting to focus in a little bit more and look at some specific genres or programs and look at the content and see who are the characters, since we've had that raised already about strong female characters, strong male. Who is the protagonist and who is the antagonist, and what role did science play in that? Because I think there's a lot of programs in which science comes out very badly, and maybe that's not all bad. I'm probably the only non-scientist in the room here, so I have to speak up for that's social scientists and arts and humanities. But also the factor about the human factor and what role people play in making decisions. I see a lot of bad current nonfiction, Sci-Fi Channel original movies where there's good science and bad science, and who's associated with what. And there's usually a bad female character and a bad male character.
Sharktopus.
And their roles and their romance. This is all interrelated. So it would be interesting to take maybe do some more case studies of some of those particular things, and then how people view them, how they read that. Do the non-scientists, are they reading the romance? Are they reading the human interaction, the group behavior, the whatever's going on, the decision making, the politics of it, the unfairness, the social justice, who knows? Where those who end up in science or in science are more likely looking at, wow, how did they get that rocket to do that? Or, I don't know, whatever. So I think they're even focusing in more specifically would be as interesting as some of your more global questions about who does what and why.
Right. There have been some studies that has more of the content analysis of the different shows, and one person even did her entire thesis on Doctor Who and content analysis of how science is portrayed within the social structure and all the sorts of stuff. And but there's definitely a lot more that can be done with it. And just something that I hadn't really seen done was looking at, asking people themselves how television had influenced their interests. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a lot more that can be done with both aspects of research.
I guess I'll ask you. I got two questions, but one is kind of statistics. You had 29 in your sample of space cadets. Mm-hmm. And I wondered first if you'd been biased by us old guys. So it wasn't even the space race. It was before that. There were things going on. But then 29, okay, you've got more than our faculty, so you've probably got a lot of grad students. Mm-hmm. Do you think 29 is enough to establish, how relevant? In other words, do you think this is real? Given that 29, you always want more, but 29 isn't that low a number.
I think it's a big enough sample to make definitely make some suggestions at what could. I mean, it definitely seemed there were some strong correlations between the space science people having watched more of these shows, and there are some significant differences. And how real is it? Yeah, I definitely would like to see more research done into it. But I mean, the differences seem to be strong enough to show that there was some truth to it.
And my second question, and I don't know how this fits in there, but reading all of this kind of got me going because it got me thinking about how I got in and about science fiction generally. Most science fiction is sociology. Utopias, mm-hmm. Let's go someplace else and we'll start a completely new society. Mm-hmm. Or looking at a period of time not like our own and looking at that society. I wonder how many sociologists were pushed there by science fiction. My nickel is very...
You're looking at one.
Okay.
That's a good question.
And, I think I mentioned at one point William Bainbridge's 2 books on science fiction. And, he never... I don't know how he got into asking the questions. They're not his primary research. But he started asking a lot of questions. One was behavior. What's in science fiction? The other one was behavior of people at science fiction conventions. Which I guess is something for a psychologist to study. Anthropologist. I'd say I might, and maybe it can't fit into this one study, but I would like to look at those. And are sociologists scientists?
Then you're qualitative or quantitative, if you ask me.
It ends with an ology.
In reality, or if you believe it's interpretation.
But sociologists and scientists.
More arts in, sociology and psychology than science, but it integrates.
Chemistry is more art.
Well, sociology, which was my major, is just a really bizarre major. I call it the study of the blatantly obvious. But I have a comment. I am really surprised at the lack of, or the moderate influence of museums. Mm-hmm. When you think of the expense of building these science museums and maintaining them and the fantastic things that they do, supposedly, and apparently these kids are just trucking through on these school trips just not being much influenced. I'm just surprised. I would have thought.
Kids, what do you expect?
Huh?
For high school kids, what do you expect? I mean, the
But I'm
brain
thinking
isn't
of
even
the
fully
little
developed
kids.
at that point.
Susan, I think that because the sample was done mostly in North Dakota, we can't say that we have lots of science museums here.
Yeah, that could be.
Our, you know, the
Sample.
but our kids, you know, travel all over. They take field trips to natural museums. You know, I don't think that you can say it's because we don't have a lot of museums, because kids in this state travel a lot. Their parents take them places.
Well, I think museums can be highly influential for some people, but just maybe not for as many people as the other ones, because more people watch television, and the people who do go to museums, a lot of times they're not paying attention. They're with a group of friends or with their family and just running through and touching buttons. I mean, yeah, I've worked in museums. You would like to think with all that work it's highly influential, and I think it can be for some people, and but perhaps just doesn't reach as many people as these other factors do.
TV show is more available than museums and parks and other stuff. More expensive, require more efforts. TV show, as Katrina just said, you push the button, relax, and passively absorb information, what you can absorb.
Yesterday, CNBC published a poll listing the top 50 states to do business in, and North Dakota scored third nationwide overall, but we were dragged down ranking number 46 for technology and industrialization. Given that a large population of your sample was based in North Dakota, do you think that our inexperience with technology has any relationship to our understanding of knowledge and our interest in these programs?
Oh yeah, like how many parents are engineers or
would
like
put Magic School Bus on instead of Sesame Street?
I'm not sure. A lot of the people who are answering this survey, a lot of them were scientists, and so obviously did get interested in science somehow. If you were to poll North Dakota in general, I'm sure the results would be quite different than my survey. So I'm not sure.
That's the nature of any survey.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a larger pool, the results could change tremendously. So it's social group oriented results.
And as I said, I didn't reach the non-science population very well. People saw this survey, and even though I didn't put science in the title, I think they thought it was just for the scientists, or probably the department heads of the non-science type of subjects didn't send it out as much. And so, yeah, I didn't really reach those very well in my survey.
This question/comment combined. Big Bang Theory to me is sociology. And I find it fascinating because I knew all those people. I can put names on all those people that I knew. And there's a strong female character. The fact that she's trailer park trash is, that's okay. But she's a very strong character, very strong personality. Is it sociology? Is that what perhaps brings in that, as I recall, it was slightly higher among females than among males. And yet, the characters, at least most of them, are scientists and engineers. Oh, yes, and the one engineer. Yeah, engineers don't count.
But he has a master's from MIT.
What's your for that?
I would, for example, suggest to add psychology and psychology of personality types into your question also, because different personality types perceive the world quite different.
Big Bang Theory was popular even amongst the non-scientists, and that's really a show that's popular with everybody. And I don't know that it's so much that people see characters that they actually know in real life. I think that you might have just happened to know people like that. But I think that the characters are interesting. The relationships with each other is what draws people in, and especially the dynamic between the non-scientists. They have someone there to represent them, Penny, and they just have it as entertaining, and it's a comedy, and so it's people are entertained by it, and I think that's what brings people in. I don't know if people are consciously thinking about the sociology of the characters.
Questions?
But I would follow up on that in terms of interesting women in science, and there's literature in lots of fields that says that women are interested in those fields in which there are relationships, there's real life application to people's lives, et cetera. And, if you look historically at science programs, it would be interesting to see if there's been a change in that. I mean, what you were talking about is that there are real people and there are real relationships and all of that, and that may be a factor in interesting women. So when you go to produce science programming, presuming that's the direction you take, what are you going to do? What's your ideal going to be if you could create the ideal science program? Would it be fiction, nonfiction? What role would women play in it? Minority characters? Would it emphasize relationships? The importance of human action and decision making?
My ideal show, it would be fiction, and it would have a wide variety of people, males, females, different types of people, ethnicities, and I would kind of want it to be similar to other primetime fictional shows, and just it happens to be they're all scientists, and so just kind of bringing science into a more mainstream viewpoint and having that be something that's front and center, an option for you to pursue. And so yeah, I would focus on the relationships between the characters and different problems they have, and then just with a science twist, having them compete for NASA internships, or just really bringing a traditional entertainment type of show, and just the difference being that they're all interested in science. I mean, obviously you'd have to have some characters that aren't interested as well, and so that you can explore the different dynamics there.
One interesting question that comes out of this, of course, is thinking about the reciprocal question, is how has science reflected the changes in our society? Mm-hmm. I remember, for example, I think it's the Gamesters Triskelion in one of the early Star Trek episodes, in which Kirk kisses Uhura, and they banned it in the South. That show was not broadcasted south of the Mason-Dixon line. And can you imagine doing that today? So it's a way of monitoring. I'm sorry.
Who did he kiss?
Kirk Uhura,
black
woman.
Well, what do you expect back then?
Today that wouldn't even be, an issue. But it really, the shows really do reflect. It's like the old movies and look at pictures of Los Angeles. You get a lot of building archaeology of Los Angeles that's not recorded anywhere else because it's just the background, the cultural background. In the shows over time has reflected the culture thing, and it really would be an interesting look at the reciprocal, is how much has culture affected what we actually see in the media.
A little bit of that in D.C. also. It's kind of fun to see the day the world stood still, because that D.C. doesn't exist anymore, in spite of the big buildings all being the same.
I'm always reminded in Them, the giant ant episode, where the daughter of the scientist is coming down, and she's a scientist too, but she wears a big skirt, high heels, makeup, and such to go out into the field with this. Mm-hmm. And and then you've got Ripley and Aliens as a completely different field character.
You need a Barbarella type.
I'm too many.
A strong woman. A strong woman. Put her in a lab coat.
Barbarella's not wearing a lab coat.
are these shows profitable? I mean, is there a message to the executives, to the producers?
Well, obviously shows like Big Bang Theory have been doing very well, and so I would say yes.
What about the hard science ones, the universe, cosmos?
Right. Well, those seem to get a lot of views too because they've kept on being produced, but they're not on the primetime stations. You have to go and subscribe to cable and get the Discovery Channel to get it. I read the German document just briefly, and in one of the articles, they were trying to ask television writers why they don't include more science, and for the most part, they are interested in including it, but they said that the broadcast executives wouldn't let them because if you went and asked the broadcast executives, they say, this is in Germany, but they say that that if you include science, that just immediately makes me think it's dull and cold and boring. And so I guess they're really trying to change that in Germany. But here we're starting to get past that, and you do have these profitable shows that include science. Have been going on for several seasons, Mythbusters, and yeah.
I think we've exhausted the questions.
Yeah.
Well, let's give
no online questions.
Our speaker one more hand. Non-committee members would leave. We'll get vicious.
Please take some fruit on your way out.